You know, Yogananda said a very profound thing. He said, the road to God is through our own nervous system. He actually said that in the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam in his explanation of it. And elsewhere, he said, remember that the brain and nervous system are the altar of the spirit. And that really this process that we go through with Kriya Yoga is to accelerate this transformation of our nervous system so that we can transmit and transmute the billion watts of spiritual power that come to us in deeper meditation. And frankly, if that kind of power comes to us before our nervous system is prepared, it is a very thrilling experience, and I don't mean thrilling in necessarily a good way. So we do have to go through a process of transformation, of evolution, in fact. Well, how does this happen? How does this process happen? Well, in the chapter on Kriya Yoga, he mentions that really, if you took an individual and said, all right, just by living rightly, how long would it take you to realize God and be able to merge back into God? And he said, basically, the minimum would be sort of 1 million years. And in fact, that's actually really understating how long it takes. That in fact, it's really more like 2 million or more. I had a feeling when I wrote that in fact it's much longer than that, and he just didn't want to discourage people too much that it takes that long. But that's with living rightly. I mean, we're living in a situation here at Ananda and in our Ananda communities where we're living rightly, and we're trying to do things rightly, and we're trying to obey the laws of good health, eat the daily diet as Master recommended to us. But we also have Kriya Yoga. And this is the accelerant. This is the catalyst that allows us to grow much more rapidly. And as Parvati was mentioning, he said that with even a few years of Kriya Yoga practice, if you could do them perfectly and could meditate for 8 to 12 hours a day, you could actually do that 1 million years in 3 years by just doing your Kriya Yoga practice. For most of us, I think it's going to take quite a bit longer, but not as long as we probably expect. Well, what parts of the nervous system are at play in this whole process? Well, it turns out, and I'm going to pick up my brain model here. So I'm holding up my brain model. This is just like my brain is oriented in my head. And remember, Anandi mentioned this briefly in her talk on Tuesday, that the most anterior part of the brain, this area that's right behind your forehead, is the frontal lobes of the brain, and the most anterior portion of that is prefrontal lobes. And this is the part of our brain that we're really activating as part of our Kriya practice physiologically. Not talking about the subtle energy centers at this point. That's kind of one level deeper than we're going to go today. I'm just going to talk about plain neurological physiology. So that's the frontal lobes, and I'm going to take the outer part of the brain off. And you can see this sort of half-moon shaped structure here. Well, we call that the limbic system. The limbic system is called that because it's shaped like a half moon. Most of the structures in the brain are named by what they looked like long before we knew what they did. You know, by the way, just in this last year, there have been more centers mapped in the brain, and 100 new centers were just mapped in the brain this last year. It was really a big deal in my literature that I read, that we're understanding more about areas of the brain that we thought didn't do anything. I always love that when they say, you know, this is a junk area of the brain, or it's junk DNA, or yeah, this hormone that we just found doesn't do anything. And there's a part of me that always just catches that and go, ha, 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 let's wait 10 years, let's wait 20 years. And, you know, I recommend melatonin for sleep for many of my older patients particularly. And when I was a medical student, they said it was a endogenous hallucinogen, means your brain produced it, but it doesn't do anything. And I remember I thought, melatonin, it does something. Okay, so this is This is limbic system. Limbic system is the part of our brain that deals with instinctual function and with more basic emotion things like fear, panic, anger. And it's kind of our built-in functional safety net that lets us stay out of trouble and reproduce, but not much more than that. And it turns out that the frontal lobes of the brain, as we activate them during our Kriya practice, in fact, any meditative practice does this, but Kriya is particularly good this way, is it begins to transfer the function of our brain away from being more limbic system focused further forward in the brain to these higher brain centers. This part of our brain that has what we call the executive function, allows us to concentrate. It's the part of our brain that determines whether we're happy or sad, our creativity, our ability to learn, all influenced by the prefrontal lobes of the brain. And by activating it, you find all these things are changed and improved. Well, it turns out that our brain is constantly rewiring itself in response to how we are using it. So the more you meditate, the better you get at meditation, and the more effective it is in helping us. As the prefrontal lobes get activated, we find there's an automatic de-emphasis of the limbic system and all the functions of the limbic system. So you will find someone who might have had anxiety disorders or a tendency toward depression when they first started meditating, and you see them 20 years later, and they have to really think and remember, what did that feel like when I was anxious? Because it takes so much to make me feel anxious now compared to then.